It's good to see everybody. Detroit, Flint, Ypsilanti, um, Hudson. Good to see a good mix of folks here and representing. And with that, for those that don't know what the Poor People's Campaign is, it was originally founded by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I won't say much more because I see Carolyn has the who we are, so I don't want to step on her toes there, but I wanted to give you that foundation there, and that this movement really is centered around eradicating poverty. And we have many different things that you will hear that we're doing today, and that you can get involved in, many different groups that you can begin to get started working in today in various different areas, as you see there on the screen, from water to environmental justice to economic justice to the fight for 15 to housing to criminal justice to immigration to voting rights and many different things in an effort to really embody loving neighbor and also development of community, development of not only this country, but the whole world. So we hope that you receive I know you will receive some meaningful and good information to take with you. And my prayer and hope is that everybody that is represented on this call today will have an unction to work in one of these areas to make sure that we all collectively tackle this huge feat together. A bunch of different, many hands make light work is a saying that a good friend of mine always says. So as we do this work together, just know that we need you. We've been waiting for you, and today is the day.
Thank you so much, Pastor Knox. I want to just interject for a moment. If you could keep your lines muted, because we're going to be receiving a lot of information today. And if you have questions on anything, please place them in the chat. I will monitor the chat, and we will have a section for questions and answers at the very end. As you also might have heard, I'm recording this. So I just want you to know that I am video recording. If you don't want your face on the recording, when you speak, that's the only time it would show. Just make sure that you turn your camera off. All right, thanks so much. And now we have Carolyn Baker, who will present information on who are we and the fundamental principles of the Poor People's Campaign. Carolyn?
Hi, can y'all hear me? Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Carolyn. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I'm with the General Baker Institute. Also part of the coordinating committee for the Poor People's Campaign. And I'm a part of National Welfare Rights Union. Presenting with me is Colleen, and I'll let her introduce herself, but Colleen and I have do a lot of educationals around this subject and other subjects. So it's just right to have Colleen with me. Colleen, can you introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, I am calling from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm part of the Arizona Poor People's Campaign, and really glad to be with y'all today.
Okay, and she's also a part of National Welfare Rights Union. All right, so I'm gonna, do I have ability to share? Yep, so I'm going to share screen. Sorry, don't mind my tabs. They're not as bad as they normally look. And all right, can everybody see my screen? I'm gonna take us to the first one. All right, so Poor People's Campaign, National Call for More Revival. Who are we and how did we get here? So what you have here is our picture of, and you'll see several pictures throughout this slide of then and now. When we refer to then, we're talking about the 19 campaign called by King and others in 1968, Poor People's Campaign. And what you see is that picture on the left. And then what you see is us today. Well, this was actually in 2018 during the 40 days. And you see all the different, it's a little blurry, but if you look further in the picture, you can see all the states. This was one of the last days of the 40 days, and all the states came together for a march, and they brought all their signs from the different states. So this is in 2018. So I'll bring us to, we want to always do a little bit of grounding in the first campaign. And so this is a quote from King when he made a call for the first Poor People's Campaign. And he says, "The only real revolutionary, people say, is a person who has nothing to lose. There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life." This is King from Nonviolence and Social Change in December of 1967. And Colleen, you want to step in?
Yeah, so that was December 1967. Just a few months later, so right after that call, King started pulling together people who were organizing across the whole country, and he was pulling people together across racial and ethnic lines. So poor folks that were Mexican American, Puerto Rican, Black, white, and he brought folks together in Atlanta in March of 1968. If you remember, he was assassinated in April of 1968. So this is right at the end here. So in March 1968, this is King speaking to possibly one of the most diverse groupings of poor people organizing together in the history of the United States. And this is what he said when he had folks together in the room.
Can y'all hear it? I'm sorry. Yeah. Can folks hear this? I can't see you, but if you can tell me.
Not too well.
Let me see.
Needs to be turned up, please.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me know if this is better.
We assemble here together today with
Is
common
that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
problems, bringing together ethnic groups that maybe have not been together in this type of meeting in the past. I know I haven't been in a meeting like this, and it's been one of my dreams that we would come together and realize our common problems. And I do want to express my deep personal gratitude and the appreciation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to each of you. And power for poor people will really mean having the ability, the togetherness, the assertiveness, and the aggressiveness to make the power structure of this nation say yes when they may be desirous of saying no. And it is my hope that we will get together and be together and really stand up to gain power for poor people, Black people, Mexican Americans, American Indians, Puerto Ricans, Appalachian whites, all working together to solve the problem of poverty.
So this was March, and then he was killed in April. But then, you know, the campaign, the Poor People's Campaign did go on. Folks did organize. The group of people that were in that room organized the Poor People's Campaign of 1968. And and have the actions there. But Carolyn, you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. So here what we have is we're going to look at the poverty or racism in 1968 and today in comparison to today. And so in 1968, 26 million people lived below the federal poverty line, which if you look at it in percentage, that's 12.8%. But the SCLC calculated the real poverty number to be closer to 35 or 40 million, which is around 20%, and of which 69% of people living below the poverty line were white.
So it's interesting that the SCLC were looking at the federal poverty line and at the time and saying this actually isn't catching the number of people who are poor, who are living on the edge. And that's one of the assessments of the Poor People's Campaign of today, Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And in our audit in 2018, sort of assessing the state of things in 2018, we found again that the federal poverty line is really inadequate for measuring how we're doing. And we found that actually looking just at Michigan, so these are updated numbers from that, but looking at Michigan in 2019, and so this is before the pandemic, 35% of people in Michigan were poor or low income. And that included nearly half of all children, 41% of women, 62% of Black people, 59% of Latinx people, and 34% of white people. And then these are pre-pandemic numbers. And so then comparing also the unemployment rate. So in 1968, when they had the Poor People's Campaign, and they were saying there was 40 million people who were poor, the unemployment rate was actually historically pretty low. It was 3.3%. And in looking today, again, we have these huge numbers of people in poverty and still a low unemployment rate. So in 2019, it was 3.5%, and that was the lowest it had been in 50 years. But then, we know that you can have a low unemployment rate and very high levels of poverty, that actually having a job doesn't solve the problem of poverty, that a lot of people are pushed out of the labor market, and so they're not counted by the unemployment rate. And then with the pandemic, the unemployment rate has gone up. And so the current unemployment rate is 5.3%. And then you can always find the Black, for the past, since World War II, you can find the Black unemployment rate by doubling whatever the white unemployment rate is at that time. And so you can break the Michigan unemployment rate down. It's for white folks, that's 4.6%, and you can roughly double that to find the Black unemployment rate. And so with the Poor People's Campaign today, looking at these conditions and finding that in some cases that things have actually gotten worse over the last 50 years. And so calling for a Poor People's Campaign today, picking up that vision that together, if we come together, that we can build power for poor people, and picking up that vision and making it real.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one. So in looking at the campaign today, so this is the next two quotes are quotes that come out of, you can find this in the budget that was put out by the national campaign. And so here we have some testimonies, and this is a testimony from my own Kaylani. And it says, I have experienced things such as water shutoffs, poverty, and living in fear of being taken away from my home, not being able to shower, brush their teeth, or cook. It's wrong. No one wants to live in poverty. Being able to live with your basic needs, including water, is a human right. And this is testimonies taken from, we've had several times the campaign of today has gone before Congress and different committees and had testimonies, even in our states and in DC. And so this is taken from one of those testimonies. And this next one comes from Tammy out of Pennsylvania with Put People First PA and the Poor People's Campaign in Pennsylvania. I'm a full-time worker living paycheck to paycheck. I am a Medicaid recipient. It is not only an absolute waste of time and resources to instill these useless requirements, but it's also dehumanizing. Between the hoops we have to jump through to get Medicaid and to keep it along with the constant cuts to it, we, the poor and dispossessed, are suffering. This myth that people receiving benefits don't work and only want a handout is rhetoric that people in power use to keep us divided and to justify their war on the poor. And it needs to stop now. And this is coming from Tammy. And so continuing to look at who are we and how did we get here? This is pictures, these next several pictures are pictures of the 1968 campaign and us during the 40 days of action and some actions even today. So this is in 1968, and then we have in 2018. This is on the left. This is an image of the Women's Mother's Day March in 1968 during the Poor People's Campaign. And what you have is a picture during the 40 days on the right in 2018. Colleen, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so in 1968, one of the things that they did is that they built an encampment on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and 6,000 people over the course of 40 days stayed there. At any one time, up to 3,000 people could be there. And so the image on the left is the National Mall, and the tents are where people stayed, and then they had all of these community buildings. And then in 2018, for the last week of the 40, we did a 40 days of action, sort of echoing the 40 days of the Resurrection City in 1968. And the last day of the 40 days of action, we set up a tent on the National Mall and would have big revivals. And it was an educationals, and it was a point that we would start at for marching and for going out. So you can see on the right, 2018 and in the background, you can see the National Monument and the Smithsonian's.
And so here we're looking at the same thing, 68, right? This is at the top on the left is Resurrection City. And it was shut down and cleared by the DC police on June 24th, the last day of the campaign. And then what you see down here is actually during the uprisings this past summer in Detroit with the police in 2020. And here we have bringing it home to Michigan. We have an image on the right of 2018 during the 40 days of some of our youth. Kaylani is one, and then Valerie Jean, who is on here, is one of Valerie Jean's kids who testified during the 40 days. And then on the left, you see images of young people during that encampment that Colleen was talking about. Here we have same thing, images of folks during 1968, during that during the campaign in 68. And here we have on the right, Rabbi Alana speaking, who was participated and was a part of the campaign here in Michigan. Here's some of those same images on the right during the 40 days and on the left during the 68. And this is that same Mother's Day March on the bottom right. And then this is during the last days of the last Memorial Monday of the final week of action during the Michigan PPC. And this is when they decided to take it to, instead of going to Lansing, did it in Detroit and took over the Q line, blocked the Q line, and then also blocked Quicken Loans, doors at Quicken Loans and other door, and went to the water department. So these are some of the folks that are on this call And these are some of the folks who are a part of the campaign here in Michigan. And I think folks on here can correct me. I think it was like over 20 something folks who got arrested this particular day. And then I'm gonna take us to our principles. Our principles for the campaign: to know about the campaign is to know the principles. And these came out when the launch for a new Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. These are what this campaign is grounded in. If to know more about the campaign is to study and understand these principles. These are always, if you ever want to talk to folks about the campaign, we encourage folks to use and bring about the fundamental principles. And so even for me, who have been with this campaign since we launched, and I have to always go back to these principles to make sure the work is grounded within this. And so you can find these, we'll send out the link, but you can always find these on the Poor People's Campaign website. And I recommend folks to always go through these principles, 12 principles that this campaign is rooted in. And that ends our piece, and I hope to see folks and get to talk to folks more as we go on in the future. Thank y'all. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you both, Carolyn and Colleen, for presenting this information in a way that we can really absorb it and then really connected ourselves to the 1968 work of Dr. King. I think that's really powerful. So next we want to switch gears for a second and talk to some of the folks here in Michigan, find out what's going on in Michigan and what are the issues that we are tackling in order to bring about more justice in the world. First up, we have Valerie Jean. Could you go to the next slide, please? Valerie Jean, are you available?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right. It's good to be here with everyone. I'm super grateful to be with you all and literally the fight for our own survival in our lives. It's a life or death situation that we're in. Especially, I'm talking about water when it comes to water, especially that. Capitalism kind of tells us every day that we don't deserve to have our basic needs met. We don't deserve clean water or clean air. In Detroit, we know that struggle and that oppression very, very well. And we're all here to challenge that. That makes us the blessed warriors of this time, the people called to do the work, the people called to think about 7 generations ahead, right? So water's interesting, right? It really is the one thing that connects all of the struggles. It's sacred and we're all responsible for taking care of it. Water is a human right and it must be protected so that it's clean and it must be made affordable for everyone. Everybody has to have access to clean, affordable water. This is the task at hand. This is our task of the time, probably the most important task of our time. When Line 5 threatens our Great Lakes every day, running illegally tar sands oil through the Great Lakes, and we're at this risk of a catastrophic oil spill. When you get a ticket, when you get ticketed because you can't afford your water, like what's happening in Saginaw, Michigan. When whole neighborhoods in Detroit are shut off at one time because nobody can afford their water. When Benton Harbor and Flint can't drink their water because there's so much lead and heavy particulates and contaminants in it, it's time to come together and scream at the top of our lungs that this is wrong and we won't let this system harm us anymore. The only way to actually do that is to come together and scream really loudly together, all of us from all over the country and all over the world. Now, we're doing a lot, I know in my work, and a lot of you are doing a lot of mutual aid and charity work and volunteering to try to get people's basic needs met because the system doesn't meet them. But that's not a substitute for a system that would protect the water and the people. It is our duty of this time to create that system, to reimagine it, to do all of the things that we have to do to organize it. And if Maureen Taylor was here, she'd tell us we have to organize every day. Organize, organize, organize. We get what we're organized to take. And, organizing turns out to be a lovely, beautiful experience. You gain family, you gain community. At this point, I've been organizing long enough. I have a global family and community, and it's very special to me. So this work is hard. It's not easy. It's heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful. We just left Benton Harbor. We just got back today, and I'm just going to wrap this up really quick and let this be the last thing that I say. But we left Benton Harbor this morning, and their water, their lead levels in their water is so high, and people are getting so sick. And it's been that way for about 3 years, but they didn't know it. People just don't know. And the people there are scared, and they're angry, rightfully. And they're really confused because of all the misinformation that gets put out. So when we start organizing and things like that, our information has to be impeccably on. And it has to come from a place, it has to be said from a place of love and understanding from where all people are. So yeah, that's the task at hand. And I'm grateful to be in this work with all of you. And I hope that other people that maybe don't do this work just dabble in it a little bit and get to learn and organize. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate Valerie Jean for her passion and her activism around protecting water.
Thank you.
Yes. And next we have Bishop Bernadelle Jefferson. Bishop Jefferson is a longtime supporter of the Michigan Poor People's Campaign, along with many other community activities. And today she will be speaking to us about some activism that's going on in Flint, Michigan. Bishop Jefferson.
Thank you so much. Proud to be here. And we talk about economic, environmental injustice. And I know the EPA is supposed to stand for justice or protect our economics, to protect us in this time. And we want to know that the nature environmental is that it's the natural world encompassed around us, and it offers that we have the natural things. And when we think about that, I get so frustrated and upset because they are not protecting us. We don't have the natural. They are polluting the air. They are polluting the water. The fight that we fight right now is that the Ajax plant is trying to put asphalt plant in Flint. Well, no, it's in Flint Township, 150 feet from the housing complex, 150 feet from the place where children, where seniors, where they have a wood burning plant there already that's been there 19 years that has caused asthma. People have died. Children have been born with breathing defects, but they say it's all right. Oh, it's not. And they want them to live with the stench. They wanted to put the plant there without any notification, none. I live a block and a half from the area where they wanted to put the plant. We didn't get not one notification. We did not give one ask. Is it all right? They turned it down. They turned it down in Fenton, Michigan, where the majority is white, upper class folks. But in Flint and in Flint Township, where there are a housing complex, where the lower income, where the Black and brown people live, they didn't even necessary to even ask, to even notify us, to even give us a chance to testify, to say that we didn't want it. They had public comment on voting day in August. Who's gonna be doing a public comment when we're trying to vote to make sure we have the right people in office? Even the housing commission that is over that area, they didn't notify them. The county commissioner that we voted to speak out for our rights, they didn't notify him. They didn't notify the people that involved. They didn't notify the people that were supposed to be protected. They didn't notify the people that they were trying to, they poison our water. Now they want to poison the air. There is injustice. There is no environmental justice for us because they are trying to kill us slowly and don't care. It doesn't matter. And when they put the wooden burning plant there, they also have a painting plant there across the street. And we protested 8 years ago for them not to add another line. They added another line anyway. And I remember going to Washington, D.C. in 2016 when we were going for the water. And the EPA, the ones that are supposed to protect us, they wasn't going to even see us. They wasn't going to even speak to us. It was myself, the mayor, and about 10 other people that went. And we demanded. And that's what we have to do. We have to stand up and demand. Don't quit. Don't throw in the towel. We have a human right to clean water. We have a human right to clean air. We have a human right to live without anything encroaching on us. No, it's not in Flint, but it encroaches 150 feet across the street on the lives, on the health, on the well-being of that community.
Well,
So
we
it's a
thank you.
continual fight for the
Bishop-
injustice that is being performed in Flint and other cities and states.
Bishop, we thank you for continuing to be a voice for us here in Flint and for keeping us all informed of the actions that are happening and just standing up for the rights and the health of the people of Flint.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's an
Mhm.
honor. We're going to keep fighting. We're not going to quit. We're
Amen.
not going to give up. And together, no matter whether it's Flint, Detroit, Saginaw, Lansing, Washington, North Carolina, South Carolina, together we shall win. So
That's right,
together we
Bishop.
shall have victory.
Yes.
right.
Yes. All right. Well, we thank you for your words today and got me stirred up a little bit. All right. Next, we have Tobias Webb. Tobias is one of the Michigan Poor People's Campaign Tri-Chairs, and they are very active in the Lansing community. Tobias is knowledgeable on many topics, but today they will speak to us about economic justice. Tobias?
Thank you so much, Elena. And thank everybody for coming out. I'll start by saying that employers should not have a negative impact on our lives. The continued consolidation of wealth to a small number of privileged individuals, the widening of the wealth gap, hurts families and sends people deeper into poverty where the choices they have to make get even harder. On the flip side of that coin, billionaires like Jeff Bezos don't create wealth out of nothing. He takes value from each of the employees of Amazon and chooses to hoard that wealth. Wealth that could go to healthcare and childcare for his employees, that could create centers for mental health care and mentorship programs, wealth that could replace pipes and ensure clean water in communities going through water battles like Flint, Detroit, Benton Harbor, and more across the country. Our society relies on generational wealth to create opportunities for folks. We all know that this is inherently racist, and yet tuitions keep rising for colleges, the cost of housing goes up, and public schools are getting less and less funding per student, perpetuating this problem. Our government has not prioritized workers and poor families in its lawmaking, and the result is more poverty when we need less. More power in the hands of folks who don't know hunger. We, the poor people, have a better understanding of what our country needs than those who have been put into power by their wealth. To gain leverage against those powers, we're determined to grow our base to better help each other across a myriad of issues that result in more economic injustice and to work against those who take advantage of low-income people. All sorts of issues tie into economic injustice. And one of our main goals is to bring in more folk affected by these issues and work together to make necessary changes for individuals, but also to empower those individuals with a whole community of activists at their back, and then bring them into the fold so that they can help empower others. This is no small task, and it's one of the reasons we're building a base and encouraging new folk to start chapter building in their own area, reaching out to folks who we know already need help, and to the activists who are already working on the issues we care about. We have an understanding of the problems that we need to fight, but if you look at our national website on the list of demands, which I recommend, as well as our principles, these are broad strokes that are going to help across all sorts of issues, but mostly are focused on nationwide policy change that will take time to enforce. Meanwhile, we need people on the ground all over Michigan to help us determine where people are really struggling and start pressuring our local governments and Michigan legislatures to make policy changes and lead the way for the rest of the nation. One of the important battles on this front is that of a livable minimum wage. A lot of these other issues we're talking about start affecting people because of low wages. So I will hand it off to the Fight for 15 now.
Hi, my name is Licia Williams and I'm from Flint, Michigan. And I wanted to say thank you everyone for having us on this very important Zoom that we're doing today. And I just want to start off by saying thank you all for your standing tall and encouraging everyone to stand up and fight back against corporate greed, social injustice, and anything else that is happening across the country, because our voices are needed and we're needed in unity. Fight for 15 started in 2012 with 200 fast food workers walking off the job, going on strike, demanding $15 an hour and a right to form a union. And since then, we have enacted wages across the country, like in California, New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Maryland, who has engaged in on the $15 minimum wage. Here in Michigan, we're still behind the ball, and in other states as well, we're still behind. Poverty wages are continuing to be a problem in our community with sustainability. You have workers, we have been in a pandemic almost 2 years, maybe right around 2 years. And these frontline workers are still not getting the respect and dignity that they deserve. They have not closed down McDonald's. They continue to keep the drive-through open. They laid some workers off, but majority of the workers were still there working through this pandemic. They did not receive pandemic pay. They did not receive the respect to even getting better wages. They're continuing to be looked at workers that are not appreciated. And, you know, when I came on this call today, I was like, wow, what am I going to say about the Fight for 15 and the movement we've been doing? And I was like, well, there's so much stuff, because we participated in the More Mondays with the PPC, and you know, and we had workers out there fighting. But then I said, well, Licia, you know, every day you see these workers and you talk to them and, you know, tell some of their stories. And just to see some of these workers having to choose between childcare, medication, paying their bills, or even just getting the bare necessities for their home. You know, an average pack of pull-ups for a mother is going to run her about $10. That's an hour of her wages. she have to work 1 hour to buy a pack of pull-ups for her baby. Childcare, you know, a lot of these places closed down during the pandemic. So mothers were first, and fathers too, because there's fathers with children that's raising their children as well. So they were all forced to make decisions on, you know, am I going to put my children at risk with catching this virus, or am I going to go to work so I can continue to pay the rent? We thank you for the government coming through and giving the $300 bonuses to help carry them, but that's gone now. You know, that's gone. So they're still at $10.25 for minimum wage. When we look at the big corporations and we look at McDonald's CEO, he made $10.8 million last year. The average worker made $9,124. So when you think about what the minimum wage is, it's less than $24,000 a year. Now, anyone tried to live off of $24,000, that is very hard. $24,000 and you trying to pay rent, average rent now is like $700 a month. And you think about, you know, consumers and things like that. Workers, we have to stand up and help educate these workers that they do deserve more. When they look at fast food workers, they think about workers who are still in college, living with moms, dads, or people that's not really out there living and on their own with having an American dream. You know, they think of these workers as not being, they're uneducated. And we have workers have college degrees that's working at McDonald's. So they are very well educated, and that's not the problem. Laziness is not the problem. The problem is, you know, they need to raise the wages. They need a living wage in the state of Michigan, across the country. When we started talking 15 back in 2009, 12, even myself was like $15, man, we're not going to get to, wow, people are not going to get this. But now when you hear 15, you having a president now who supports 15. We have a lot of elected officials who supports the 15. Locally here in Flint, we had a lot of our mayor come out and support 15. You know, city councils have came out and supported. You know, we have community leaders, and I think Bernadette Jefferson, Bishop Jefferson, who has came out and supported, even with walking with the Poor People's Campaign movement, and we're supporting each other because that's how important it is. That is how important it is that the minimum wage have to be a sustainable living wage for families across the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tobias and Alicia. Thank you so much for bringing those issues of economic justice to the forefront. We as a campaign believe everyone has a right to live. And we really just need to keep pushing on our legislators to make sure that everyone actually has the means to make a living. All right, we're going to skip a little bit in our program. We'll come back to Pamela and Kim, but I hear that Efren is on the line. Efren Paredes Jr. is a criminal justice activist from West Michigan. He's one of the leading voices in demanding reform of the Michigan prison system. So Efren, if you're available, could you join us?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. It's great to be with you guys today. Thanks for joining us for this open house. My name is Efren Paredes Jr., and I am a 48-year-old Latinx man who works at the intersection of decarceration, racial justice, and conflict resolution. There are currently 2.4 million people locked away in America's prisons. Nearly 10 million people are in prisons, jails, or under some form of carceral surveillance. They are citizens rendered non-persons, invisible, and subjected to the inhumane cruelties of social death. The U.S. shamefully incarcerates more of its citizens than any other nation in the world. Though it comprises only 5% of the world's population, it locks away 25% of all the people who are caged on the planet. The vast majority of these people were extracted from disadvantaged and underserved communities that are poor, low income, and one emergency away from economic ruin in America. The poorest, who are women and people of color. While African Americans and Latinx people comprise just 32% of the U.S. population, they represent a shocking nearly 60% of the nation's population locked behind bars. Of the people held in jails, 74% have not been convicted of a crime. They are forced to remain incarcerated, awaiting court proceedings because of their inability to afford the privilege of paying the required cash bail. The criminal penal system punishes and exerts control over poor and low-income individuals and communities of color, which results in the reinforcement of multiple interlocking social hierarchies and forms of oppression. There is a growing recognition across the political spectrum that the phenomenon of mass incarceration fails to achieve public safety. It perpetuates cycles of harm in communities and is costly and ineffective. We must reimagine justice as a means of holding individuals accountable for their actions while also repairing them. Simultaneously, we must acknowledge the current damage that mass incarceration inflicts upon human beings. By shifting resources away from prisons and punishment and towards community reinvestment, it is possible to build alternatives to prisons that heal and restore rather than punish and destroy. We are also called to recognize that since 1990, local and state law enforcement agencies have received over $7.4 billion worth of equipment from the Department of Defense, which has been used to militarize law enforcement agencies and transform communities into war zones. Every year since 2013, there have been also over 1,000 police killings with Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people disproportionately more likely to be killed by police than their white counterparts. Unlike the George Floyd killing, which was captured on tape by a citizen journalist, most police killings aren't recorded. This has contributed to an astonishing 98% of police killings resulting in no criminal charges due to an abysmal lack of transparency or accountability. The Michigan Poor People's Campaign asserts we must end these social injustices and begin healing the nation by repealing programs that provide military equipment and training to domestic law enforcement agencies, by ending the machinery of carceral punishment and violent policing, and by centering reform efforts on the demands of grassroots organizations and communities who are most egregiously impacted by these injustices. My lived experience as an incarcerated person caged in Michigan's carceral system for more than 3 decades has helped inform me of these chilling realities. I'm sharing this message from you from the Lakeland Correctional Facility in Coldwater, Michigan. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you, Efren, for taking the time out this afternoon to give us your experience and your knowledge on the subject and to inspire us to do something about this injustice in the system.
You're welcome.
Yes. All right, thank you. And now we will have a talk by Pamela Walker Dawson. She'll be speaking to us on issues of housing in Michigan. She's a member of Michigan Poor People's Campaign and a housing organizer for Detroit People's Platform. Pamela?
Good afternoon. A little history of housing. Between 2004 and 2006, leading up to the housing crash, 75% of mortgages in Detroit were subprime. The assumption was that housing prices would continue to increase, thereby buyers could refinance or sell. The 2007 real estate crash based on subprime lending crisis based on financial schemes perpetrated by Wall Street and mortgage lending institutions. The root cause was the subprime lending activity driven by greed and lack of oversight regulations. Banks and other financial institutions turned these loans into financial instruments and sold them to investors around the world and made a lot of money. Some of the main players in Detroit were Countrywide, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, US Bank, Quicken Loans, Ameriquest, among a few. At one point, Detroit listed 170,000 foreclosed properties. Many Detroiters tell stories of families being sold, family homes being sold right from under them and not being aware till someone showed up on their doorstep claiming ownership. Much of the long-standing blight in Detroit can be attributed to the failure of the banks to assume responsibility for the maintenance and upkeep of thousands of vacant properties that are now owned. Excuse me. The overall impact on the housing market is that unless you have cash, it became difficult to buy a home. At one time, mortgage lending in Detroit dropped to less than $1,700 between FHA, VA, and conventional loans. With most lending going to University District, Midtown, East England's Village, Palmer Woods, and downtown areas that are beginning to experience income in wealthier and white populations. Because of the failure of the housing system, LLCs created overnight brought up large numbers of properties, became rental agencies. Market and housing demands, are creating pressure on home prices, and rentals are causing an uptick in housing costs. Renters. Detroit is now a majority renter city with 52% of community members are renters. Black households make up 82% of renter populations. Most Detroiters paying more than 50% of monthly household income for rent and utilities, excluding transportation. The standard is to pay no more than 30%. Detroit ranks in the top 10 where residents pay more than 50% of their income to rent. The average apartment rental can vary from $750 to $950 for one bedroom. Many barriers still exist, is exorbitant fees for filing of criminal background credit checks, paying your own Wi-Fi and your own water. Home ownership. Low-income homeowners struggle with recent expenses such as taxes and high home maintenance costs. The income of the average Detroiter is about $32,000 annually. Residents' requests for assistance often go unanswered by elected officials. On the other hand, elected officials have a history of providing public support, monetary or public property, and on land to corporate interest groups. Between 2016 and 2020, Detroiters provided roughly $1 billion in tax subsidies to private economic development projects, including luxury high-rise apartments, condos, sports arenas, relocation of corporate headquarters, and entertainment values. Detroit, Michigan, we have a problem. Thank you.
Woo. I am listening to those numbers, and I don't know about you all, but I have a sense of anger, righteous anger around how all of these systems are just holding people in a place where they cannot survive. Thank you for that, Pamela.
That was beautiful.
Wasn't it? Yes. And now we got to do something about it. Next up, we have Kim Redigan, a member of Michigan Poor People's Campaign and an activist for immigrant rights and immigration reform. Kim organizes a weekly vigil for immigration in Southwest Detroit, and she's participated in actions at our southern border numerous times, even recently. So Kim, if you're available, could you join us?
Sure, Elena. Thank you very much. And it's great to be with everyone today. I hope we're seeing the intersectionality of everything as it's being discussed today, of all these issues. So I'm a high school teacher, and over the years, I've had students who have been traumatized by deportations, by the ICE raids, by family separation, and by uncertain legal status. Like many of us here, I've protested for years against war. And I've seen firsthand how war has devastated and terrorized entire populations, pushing people from their homelands and across faraway borders. Lives disrupted and displaced with my tax dollars, with our tax dollars. Over the past few years, I've done human rights work along the southern border. I've witnessed how US policies have left people stranded in Mexican border towns where they're vulnerable to extortion, kidnapping, rape, torture, and death. I'd like to share a story. Just last week, I was in Nogales, Mexico, where I joined a march that was led by migrants who are calling on the Biden administration to put an immediate end to Title 42. Title 42 is an obscure law that uses the pandemic as an excuse to deny asylum seekers in desperate situations the right to enter the United States. The medical community has spoken clearly that this law is arbitrary and unnecessary. Although President Biden did end the Trump administration's deadly migrant protection protocols, sometimes referred to as the Remain in Mexico policy, that kept people locked down in border towns where they're sitting ducks, victims of organized crime and cartels, Title 42 has had exactly the same effect. It simply remained in Mexico by another name. In Nogales, 25 of us representing various faith communities were paired with families seeking asylum. The plan was to accompany the families one at a time to the port of entry, where they would show their proof of vaccination, a negative COVID result, and a letter verifying the dangers that they were fleeing. I was paired with a 19-year-old woman named Ana and her 1-year-old daughter, Isabella, who are running from death threats in their hometown. When the first group, a Honduran family of 7, accompanied by the Bishop of Tucson, approached Customs and Border Protection officers, they were rudely turned back. And then the officials shut down the port of entry completely for an hour to both pedestrian and to vehicle traffic. The remaining 24 families decided to wait out the authorities. When the port finally reopened, the families approached one at a time, only to be met with stone-faced silence. When it was our turn to approach, Anna broke down in tears, pleading that her life and the life of her infant daughter are in danger. Her pleas were met with cold indifference. None of the 25 families was admitted. I share this story to offer a snapshot, a single picture of how broken this system is, a system that needs to be transformed and humanized. The poverty that pushes people from their home countries is often rooted in colonialism, which is rooted in white supremacy, which is maintained by militarism. Military force, often funded by the US, is used to enforce and maintain harmful trade agreements and structural adjustment programs that crush local economies and destroy the lives of our brothers and sisters in other lands. Others are refugees of wars and occupations. Among the fastest growing group of refugees right now in the world are environmental refugees, collateral damage of climate change. Much of this is sanctioned and supported by Christian nationalism, which wraps the cross in a flag, keeping people captive to an ideology of domination and violence. So many injustices coalesce at the border. We need to connect the dots, which is why the Poor People's Campaign is so important. The 5 interlocking evils that are named by the Poor People's Campaign all meet at the border: poverty, racism, the war economy, ecological devastation, and Christian nationalism, religious nationalism. Whether it's fighting to end Title 42, working to pass the Licenses for All bill here in Michigan, welcoming refugees mid-state, or protesting state violence against Haitian asylum seekers, people across Michigan can unite their efforts under the banner of the Poor People's Campaign to build the kind of mobilization that we need to win. Justice has no borders. There are no walls that can hold back the power of the people united. Forward together, not one step back.
Amen. Thank you, Kim. And we thank you for being there for Anna and Isabel, even though they did not have the type of outcome that we'd hoped for them. All right. Next up, we will have Sam Stark. He will round out our speakers from Michigan PPC. And he is a UAW retiree and organizer for Southeast Jobs with Justice. He'll speak to you about fighting voter suppression. Sam?
Thanks, Elena. I'm going to start out with a quote, and I want as many people take a guess what year those words were spoken. The quote begins, "They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." May not have heard that quote before. Any guesses when it was said?
You're welcome to come off mute for this one.
1955, McConnell, like today, I read. Lydia?
Someone said 2020, Trump.
2012, all good guesses. The right guess would be 1980. And the speaker was a guy named Paul Weyrich. And he was one of the founders of the New Right conservative movement within the Republican Party, but they weren't like my old Uncle Eddie's Republican Party. So 1973, Paul Weyrich with Coors Brewery money co-founded the Heritage Foundation. You may have heard of the American Legislative Moral Majority. At that time, Paul Weyrich said, "We are radicals working to overturn the present power structure of this country." That's pretty radical. But why were Weyrich, the Coors family, and other far right-wing corporations so hell-bent on overturning the present power structure? Well, this is what they knew. They knew in 1929, the top 1% of Americans owned 50% of the nation's wealth. But the top 1%'s ownership of the wealth had fallen to 19%. And they felt something needed to be changed to overturn the present power structure. Who did they blame for this, their loss of wealth? Liberal government, strong unions, liberal social programs like Social Security and Medicare, and the higher taxes that were imposed on the super rich to pay for that middle-class standard of living for many Americans. So as far back as 1980, far-right corporations knew they couldn't overturn structure and liberal agenda if the majority of Americans voted. So guess what? Who do you think is behind these voter suppression bills today across the country? They didn't come from individual state legislatures. The Heritage Foundation and its political arm, Heritage Action, they're not out to make Donald Trump happy or to fix some unproven massive voter fraud. They are still pursuing the goal that they set out in 1980 of reducing the voting population in order to weaken government programs that benefit all poor and working class Americans. Now, it's pretty clear that the main target of this voter suppression campaign are Black voters, who are the main supporters over the years of progressive social programs. But a whole bunch of other voters will also be negatively impacted as well. Seniors, single parents, disabled, rural voters, workers who vote 2 or more jobs, students, and other voters of color. But I want to close out by talking about our unlikely allies in the struggle to get to vote. Poor whites and working class whites, the majority of which have voted conservatively since 1968, but were once the third main supporters of FDR's New Deal. First African Americans, Jews, and the next support group were poor Southern whites. The important thing today is that poor and working class whites live in those state representative and state senate districts where their elected public officials support voter suppression. So they're the ones who can apply the pressure. I'm not asking these conservative white voters to switch their party affiliations, but to stand up for democracy and their right to vote and the social programs that they benefited them. It happened before. As Martin Luther King pointed out When the Voting Rights Bill passed in 1965, more poor whites gained the right to vote than blacks in the South. There were 5 million poor Southern white sharecroppers compared to 3 million poor black sharecroppers. Why? Because of poll tax from voting. By the Constitution, you can't suspend someone's right to vote purely on the color of their skin. You have to find some other reason. That's what they're doing now. So finally, poor whites and working class whites, they need Social Security, Medicare, and essential government programs that the far right wants to kill. And as I remember, a quote from a friend in the 1970s, an old radical, there's nothing black people are fighting for that the white working class doesn't. We need to point that out to them. It's a struggle where we have to join forces if we're going to win, to preserve our democracy and our right to vote. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sam. All right.
Thank you.
I was getting some messages in the chat. They were wondering, folks were wondering when we were going to talk about voting rights. And I said, oh, we've got some strong activists in voting rights. So I thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Elena.
Yep. All right. So I know we've been bombarding you with a ton of information today, but all of our speakers demonstrate that there are so many fronts that the Poor People's Campaign of Michigan addresses. We're organizing to shift the moral narrative around the demand for justice and dignity for all people. There's so much great work going on in Michigan, and I'm hoping that you all become inspired by listening to our speakers. Next up, we'll have Bill Wiley-Kellerman, who will tell us more about the structure of the Michigan campaign and then how you can get involved in the campaign. Bill, are you available?
Yeah, am I?
All right. I
Can you hear me?
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Elena. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here and so glad for all the presentations that really do demonstrate the intersectionality of the Poor People's Campaign work. I want to talk a little bit about the action teams that support the day-to-day work of the coordinating committee. All of those teams have coordinating committee members on them and leading them, but you don't have to be a working member of the coordinating committee to join, support, or work on a team. So consider that as you listen. I'm briefly going to describe the work of these 8 or 9 teams. And rather than providing contact information for each of them or any particular one, I'll mention some leadership, but invite you to get in touch with Elena or one of the co-chairs as a way in. And I'm actually going to start with direct action because that's the way in which the campaign was launched 3 years ago. You heard reference early on to the 40 days of action here in Michigan, as around the country. There were these 40 days with 6 arrest actions, mostly in Lansing, the last one in Detroit, 120 some folks being arrested in those actions. And the planning and the training, as well as jail and court support work, were undertaken by the Direct Action Committee. Direct action and nonviolent civil disobedience are fully embraced as a tool and tactic of the campaign, which has even coined the term moral fusion direct action, which reflects both the intersectionality of issues and the multiversity of actors in these events. And again, nonviolence is one of the fundamental principles. The work of this committee involves nonviolence training. You heard reference to Benton Harbor, and we're recently in a conversation with folks there in the water struggle about providing nonviolence training, as well as bringing folks to the struggle there. And we've got resources, both personal and financial, to offer this kind of training and organizing Tobias, Kim Redigan, and myself are the point people for this campaign, or this team, I mean. The outreach team focuses on making people aware of current developments and actions with a goal of informing people and energizing them to participate. That includes flyers, phone banking, open houses. The mobilization team coordinates with the media communications. And the current mobilization, of course, that we're working on is related to the Congress, which is upcoming in the next few weeks. I hope you've seen notice of that. Judith Alexander heads up this work. Faith outreach is related to the fundamental casting of the campaign as a moral movement, which draws on a whole spectrum of faith traditions and spiritual practices. The faith outreach team specifically seeks to involve congregations, houses of worship, spiritual communities in the work of the campaign in Michigan and nationally. And this also is in the principles. The campaign strives to make this visible publicly, where faith leaders wear liturgical or ceremonial vestments, robes and stoles and collars in public action. Reverend Cass Charette is the point person on this team. You actually got a pretty good introduction to political education, both in a couple of ways. Carolyn Baker of General Baker Institute, who began our session, leads this team, and that opening presentation, brief presentation, is actually a pretty good example of what's involved in political education. Many times movements emerge and grow sometimes without knowing the history that their work relates to, or even the history of their own movement. And the national campaign has units and people like Colleen Wesselwalker, who spoke, who's a historian, who produced both historical and issue-based research, like the audit, that's available to state committees and actually often tailored to our own location in Michigan. The political education team is itself engaged in local and statewide analysis of issues and offers periodic events favoring kind of a popular education model, both for the coordinating committee itself and for our wider base. And as I mentioned, Carolyn Baker is the point person for that. Communications, both in an ongoing basis and for specific events, the communication team provides and coordinates communications. And that comes in the form of notices, flyers, letters to various constituencies, press releases, social media, website support, photography, video, slideshows, and PowerPoints. All of that's related to communication. And this is actually a good example, a team.
You have 1 minute remaining.
This is that's Efren. This is a good example of where someone with technical skills, savvy, but not necessarily interested in being a coordinating committee member, could bring their gifts and specifically, help with these kind of things like social media and all of that. And again, Cass leads that group. Art, culture, and music. This represents a really fundamental commitment of the campaign, both nationally and locally. Music, art, and culture tend and maintain the spirit of the movement through music, chant, visual art, bannering, messaging.
Thank you for using GTL.
Early in the campaign, a national training for cultural workers was provided. I think it was one of the first training events nationally. And there's really no march or public gathering that happens without this element. I was thinking we ought to be singing, and maybe I'll just remind folks who know it and teach others one that's song that's born of this movement, which goes like this. Somebody's been hurting our children, and it's been going on far too long. Gone on far too long. Gone on far too long. Somebody's been hurting our children, and it's been gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. I may be wrong. I know that came out of that first cultural training. It may have been collectively written, because I know that was some of their process there. But that's the kind of thing that undergirds our all of our events. And I think it's really an important fundamental movement commitment. Another team that represents and supports a basic and upfront commitment of the campaign is that we're led representationally and in fact by the folks most impacted by the systemic oppression that we're fighting. So that means low income, low wealth people, low wage workers, Black folks and people of color, indigenous communities, but also disabled, LGBTQ, queer folk, and our tri-chairs are represented by those in that way, in this connection. But it's also something we also have to be conscious and active at working and maintaining, and that's the focus of this committee. And then lastly, the fundraising and finance team, it's originally and potentially separate, though at present kind of functioning as one team. And this is the sort of nitty-gritty work of grant writing, budget setting, donor tracking, check writing, and collaboration with our fiduciary partner, Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. We've got folks on this call who are monthly automatic donors to the Michigan and national campaigns. And there are churches and other bodies that support us with grants, which is so important. This is another team we're in the process of expanding and redeveloping at the moment. And it's another place where someone who maybe has financial or numeral acumen, but doesn't necessarily want to work on the larger committee would really find a welcome place. And I'm against my better gifts. I'm currently leading this group. So if any of those on the call feel, having heard the structure, feel a pull to support the campaign in any of these ways, don't hesitate to let Elena know so she can pass it along. Thanks again to all of you.
Thank you, Reverend Wiley Kellerman. You've given us a good overview of the working parts of the campaign and where people can get started on working. I believe up next we have a Q&A session because we've bombarded you with a lot of info. Are there questions? I saw one question in the chat. And the question was, what about the question of reproductive rights? The oppression of women falls hard on Black and Latinx women. I am not well versed in our position on reproductive rights. Is anyone on the call knowledgeable there? If not, I'll take it back. All right.
From the beginning of the organizing for the Poor People's Campaign, we've always stood with women. We participated in Women's March and in some organizing around that, and women's reproductive rights and really their rights to their own decision-making for their own bodies. So that's always been something that we've kind of collaborated with folks about, but I don't think we've ever had, from the beginning, I don't think we've ever had like a working group that actually focused on that. But we definitely, have always participated and collaborated with other folks that were working on that. So if folks are working on that, we bring it to the table, yeah.
Thank you so much, Valerie Jean, for jumping in for us. Were there any other questions? All right. I do see one more in the chat. And it sort of leads into our next steps. We wanted to let you know about the upcoming Congress. And let me get my page open, just one second. The upcoming Poor People's Moral Action Congress. Over a period of 4 days, this will be October 15th, October 16th, October 18th, and October 23rd. The Poor People's Moral Action Congress will feature a press conference, 2 plenary sessions, and a national town hall. These will be all centered around our theme of building power from the bottom up. And because of COVID-19, we'll be hosting this Congress via Zoom. We're building a diverse fusion delegation of poor and directly impacted people, young people, clergy, faith leaders, and moral advocates and activists from across our state. The Congress is open to all people who've been active in the Poor People's Campaign and those who are interested in getting involved. You'll have a chance to sign up on the next thing that I'm going to ask you to do, and that will be our survey. We're adding a survey to the chat right now. The survey is going to ask you if you are interested in that Congress. Also, it will ask you if you're interested in the action teams that Reverend Wiley Kellerman told us about. So if you could take a moment and go through that survey, I'll give you a couple moments to fill that out. Can everyone access it? If you're having trouble, please let me know in the chat. While we're doing that, maybe I'll try to play the song that Bill directed us to. Let's see if we can hear it.
Coal ash. And the meeting came about because Duke Energy
Can you all
was
hear
spilling
it?
coal ash into poor Black and brown and poor white neighborhoods. After hearing testimony after testimony of people who were impacted physically and mentally by the coal ash, this song came as an inspiration of those testimonies. So I'll call to you, somebody's hurting my brother and it's gone on, and your response is far too long. Yes, it's gone on. Far too long. It's gone on. Far too long. Somebody's hurting my brother and it's gone on. Far too long. Now the end is, and we won't be silent anymore. We'll say that together. And we won't be silent anymore. Okay? And so we'll try the rehearsal version, which goes, oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting my hurting my sister, and it's gone on for too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear somebody's causing the water, and it's gone on for too long. Yes, it's gone on for too long. Tell you it's gone on for too long. Somebody's causing the water, and it's gone on for too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Have you heard somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on for too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Just the voices stop clapping. And we won't. And we won't be silent anymore. Last time, all together. And we won't be silent
All right. Well, thank you all for hanging in with us. Did everyone access the survey? Any questions that popped up while you were doing the survey? All right. Well, let me check the chat one more time.
I did see a few other questions popping into the chat just about maybe not available to attend meetings on a regular basis, but how do we find out about particular projects that we might get involved in, things like that. And I think that we'll try to handle that based on your survey results. Luke just pointed out to us that we could only check one area, one issue area. We couldn't check multiple issue areas. And I apologize for that. That was a boo-boo on our part, but we do plan to do individual telephone follow-ups. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to try to schedule a meeting of each of the action teams so that when we call you, we can let you know that the action team you signed up for is scheduled to meet on such and such a day. Those will be Zoom meetings. And then as far as issue areas, the team leaders in those areas will be given the names of everybody who signed up for that area so that they can keep you informed of individual projects. And they'll definitely be utilizing your names and contact information to try to get things going in that area. One of the things you had the opportunity to sign up for in the survey was a text bank that we're trying to pull together that'll deal with voting rights. So that's an ongoing project that we would love for everybody here to sign up to be a part of that. Clinton put a question in the chat about, are we mobilizing towards the National March on Washington in 2022? And definitely we are. That's why we wanted to hold this open house and get our action teams scheduled to meet so that those action teams can get to work on mobilizing for National March on Washington, June of 2022.
Hello, I just like to, hi, I just like to say that those boxes, now you can mark as many as you'd like in those questions on the survey.
Oh, good. Thank you, Cass.
And Judy, thanks for pointing out that Clinton is here. I'm not sure, Clinton, would you like to speak to us? We're lucky enough to have our national field team member here. Clinton, are you available?
Hey, yeah, thanks so much. It's so good to be on this call. I just put in the chat how fabulous this meeting has been and how grounding in all of the various issues that we are fighting against and for across Michigan and across the country. listening to those directly impacted folks lead the way and talk to us about what they're facing and how we can fight together. My name is Clinton Wright. I don't live in Michigan. I grew up in Ohio. My apologies for that for any Ann Arbor fans. But I currently live in North Carolina. I'm in a part of our national field team, working with states sort of across the Northeast and Midwest as we continue to fight against racism and poverty and ecological devastation and the war economy and this corrupt moral narrative that blames oppressed people for our oppression. And I don't have a lot to say other than get yourself registered for Congress. Get yourself registered for one of these action groups that the leaders of this call have asked us to sign up for. Plug yourself in, whether you have 5 minutes a week or 50 hours a week to be given to the Poor People's Campaign and to fighting in this unified front of poor people coming together across Michigan. I am so excited to be with y'all in the power that you are demonstrating today. And I look forward to seeing you at Congress and on the next call. So I'll pass it back to you, Elena.
Thank you so much, Clinton. And I wanted to remind you that I'm going to send out the link to register for Congress to everyone who said that they want to go to Congress. I will be sending that out probably within the next 30 minutes. Please register by tomorrow evening. If you are registered by tomorrow evening, you will be included in all the communication that will get us ready for Congress. And remember, our first event is on October 15th. So that's coming up really quickly. And finally, I just want to thank you all for your time, taking out time on a Sunday, which is usually a day of rest or a holy day for many of us, and coming together with us and learning about what we're doing and just showing that you are interested in changing the way things are. We really appreciate that. Again, my email address is right there on the screen. You can email me anytime and I will get back to you with the answers that you request. All right. If that's all, I will ask Reverend Wiley Kellerman to close us out in a center or in a prayer or a thought.
Thanks, Elena. I think I will offer a prayer. I come from Christian tradition, and but I pray mindful of all the variety of spiritual practices and traditions that gather in our community. Pray. O God, who is the spirit of the universe, bending its moral arc toward justice, who calls us to nonviolence in loving kindness, to transformation in doing justice, and to community and movement together in walking humbly. We give thanks for knowing and feeling and recognizing your spirit underneath the work of this campaign. We pray for those who live day to day with the knee of the system on our necks, on their necks, and yet we also give thanks for the resistance and resilience and the leadership that those folks provide to this movement, which grows daily. We give thanks for all who have been on this call, for any nudges and pulls and touches and calls of your spirit on them to take particular action, and we know you invite that even now again. We pray for the Congress upcoming and for its leadership, for its fruitfulness as we look toward mass action together next summer. Bless us all. We pray in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. For together.
Mhm. And thank you all for
Peace
filling
together.
out the survey.
Yes, thank you, Elena, for hosting this. This has been awesome. Judy,
you.
Cass, the whole crew, everybody for putting this together, and everybody that presented this. This has been awesome.
All right. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you all. All right. Until next time, y'all.
Yep, great
Bye.
work, Elena. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
And good to see y'all.
See you
See
later.
y'all later.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good work, all.
Look forward to seeing you all in person one day.
Yes, yes.
Yes. All right. Y'all take care.
All right.
Bye.